All right, Fermi's paradox. All right, so I'm going to be as clear and as brief as possible. Enrico Fermi was a physicist from Italy, and he had a very supple mind. He could grasp mathematical concepts intuitively. He was a genius. He, not Albert Einstein, was the father of the Manhattan Project and nuclear power and nuclear energy and all this other stuff. It was he, not Einstein, that penned that letter to it was Roosevelt, to pen that letter to Roosevelt that's famous for stressing the necessity to start the Manhattan Project, which built the nuclear bomb. Einstein wasn't good at writing. He wasn't his gifts were not one of verbal and literary communication. His gifts were very mathematical in nature. So he wrote it, but since no one knew Enrico Fermi, Einstein signed it and they sent it to the president. And because it was from Albert Einstein, the president, of course, was very interested in what Albert Einstein had to tell the president of the United States. So that's what Enrico Fermi was. He was a uber genius. He was one in several million. So when he was having a break, I think it was either a lunch break or a snack break or something at Los Alamos Labs, all the other physicists, the top physicists in the world, were sitting around. And what I'm telling you now is what Fermi's paradox is. They're all sitting around, and they were all very proudly saying that the likelihood of us being alone in the universe is very minimal. That to think that we're alone in the universe is very self-absorbed and very arrogant for the human species. That with all the numbers of stars just in our galaxy, I think it's something like 400 million. That number is so huge that the likelihood that we're the only one with life, an intelligent life, is just absurd. They were all patting themselves on the back about the fact that they could do that they were noble and they were refusing to believe what is human nature to believe. It's human nature to think that we're special, and they were all self-grandiose, and they were all patting themselves on the back, and they were all like so proud of themselves to be so intellectual, superior than the common man who thinks that the earth is unique somehow. And so Enrico Fermi, who was leaps and bounds more intelligent than all those guys put together, did the math, did the statistics in his head in an instant, in a fraction of a second. And he said his answer, and I'll explain the math in a second, because that's what's important. His answer is, so where are they? Now, the conclusion of the math that Enrico Fermi did in his head was that they should be walking down the street. They should be all around us, and they shouldn't be. Their existence should be obvious. Now, here's the math. And this is the hard part to grasp because they deal with gargantuan numbers of immense size. And so me trying to explain this to, I'll just say his name. Well, I won't say his name. Let's call him, what's a good name? something that's not insulting. Leroy. Let's just call him Leroy. So me to explain this to Leroy, my cousin's boyfriend, I never got through to him. And it was years trying different ways and different angles to explain this to him. And then years later, he came back with something, a comment where, well, did this change your mind? Because in Australia, they say there's so many more worlds with life on it. I got so upset that the stress actually threw my back out. I never told anyone this. And so, yeah, for about 3 days, I was bedridden because this guy could never understand it. So here's the math. All right. How Enrico Fermi saw it was that our species is incredibly young, incredibly new. We came into existence in just a few 100,000 years. Now, on the scale of the universe, that is so tiny, incredibly tiny. And we went from being simple simians to walking on the moon in that short period of time. Okay? Now, our advancement in science is exponential. So, even though we say, oh, it's going to take us 10,000 years to go to the next, to build crafts that go interstellar, that's still a tiny fraction. And to our view today, that's what it would take. But it probably is not reality because of the fact that we advance exponentially. Okay, that's one part of what Fermi thought. Now, the next thing he thought of was the fact that the Big Bang happened 14 billion years ago, and there's a gap of 10 billion years because our solar system has only existed for 4 billion years. So in 10 billion years, the galaxy has existed for 10 billion years. And if it takes maybe 300 to 600,000 years for human beings to intelligent species to come about, and we've been subjected to mass extinctions. So, as crazy as it sounds, our planet is not ideal for life and is not ideal for intelligent life, but yet here we are. Even though it's not ideal, we eventually came about. So, in the span of 10 billion years, with all the 400 billion, did I say million earlier? I meant 400 billion stars. Yeah, there's 400 billion stars in the Milky Way, not million. So for all those stars and all that time, and there's probably some planets that are more ideal, for 10 billion years there are other planets that are more ideal, intelligent life, it is unthinkable that they couldn't have not only arisen, but it would be unthinkable that they hadn't colonized the whole galaxy, because that would be something that would, the colonization of the entire galaxy is something that would go viral. Because think of it for a second. Let's suppose in 10,000 years we colonize 4 planets. See, now each one of those 4 planets would colonize 4 planets, so that then you have 16, and each one of those would colonize all the 64 planets, and it would be in a shorter, because we keep advancing, and it'd be in shorter amount of time, and it would go viral. It would in less than a million years. In less than a million years, it is clearly it is not unthinkable to assume that we could easily colonize the entire galaxy. Now, to Enrico Fermi, all this was intuitive. The math just kind of clicked together in his head. But for us simple people, we can figure that out if we put all our hopes and everything aside, and we can still figure that out. Okay? Now, for some reason, so when Enrico Fermi figured that out, now years go by, and then there's something called SETI, Search for Intelligent Signals from Space. And by the way, human beings are motivated by hope. They're not motivated by facts, and they skip over some facts. And one of the facts that they skip over was some radio technician wrote a piece on this, that radio signals actually degrade very quickly over time. I mean, it was a big thing when Sagan wrote his book Cosmos, and he talked about how the nearest star, so many light years, the nearest such and star system would be watching episodes of I Love Lucy and everything. And Sagan was not really, he was a very mediocre scientist. That's something people don't want to believe. And he wrote this in the book. And since people were hopeful for that, they wanted to believe that. And there have been millions of dollars put into the SETI program. And I've worked during the .com boom. I worked at places that they had that screensaver called SETI at home. And all the power of all these computers, they were processing the radio signals in hope that they were going to get intelligent radio signal from space. I'm sure you might have heard of this. It was common knowledge everywhere. And at first I was one of those people that were excited until I heard about Fermi's paradox. And according to Fermi's paradox, aliens, intelligent aliens that are more intelligent than we are, should already be around. And so since they're not around for one reason or the other, for reasons we don't know, then SETI is a waste of time. We're not going to hear radio signals from space. And I would debate people this. It was sort of like all the SETI enthusiasts were here, and I was just one little step above them, right? Because I understood Fermi's paradox. So I would tell them this is all just a waste of time. It's not even worth the cycles on your computer. But people had almost a religious fervor about SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI. So people had a passion for it. And I would tell Leroy, his name's not Leroy, but let's just call him Leroy. So I would tell Leroy about this, and we'd have debates back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then finally, people started to realize that Enrico Fermi might actually be right. And so the Planetary Society, and Carl Sagan, was wrong. Enrico Fermi was a lot smarter than Carl Sagan was. But anyway, Carl Sagan was a good communicator of science, kind of like, but he was pretty mediocre. I could tell stories at the university of how the physicists thought he was just in private, he was kind of a cruel guy and was just interested in fame. And people who criticized his very optimistic idea of extraterrestrial intelligence, physicists that criticized it, that were real scientists, he would destroy them. He would try to get them fired from university. Anyway, Sagan wasn't too bright. He was brighter than most of us, but since we're not an intelligent species, that's not saying so much. Anyway, so intelligence scale. Most people, Carl Sagan, Enrico Fermi, all right? And I was appreciative of the Fermi's paradox and what Enrico Fermi said. I could understand it. And so I was telling people SETI is not going to... I would tell people long before SETI kind of started to lose interest that we're not going to hear radio signals from any intelligent beings. There was one called the WOW signal, but it's been proven that was just like a pulsar or something. So, what more can I say about this before I go on? Let's see. There's something else I had in mind. Oh. So anyway. Oh yeah, I know. So Paul Allen, who worked at Microsoft, he was really big. He bought into the SETI thing too, and he spent hundreds of millions of his own money building a array of radio telescopes out in the desert. He said, well, if the private sector and the Planetary Society aren't going to put enough money for this, I'm going to do it. He really butt into SETI big time too. And very expensive, very high tech, very, very sophisticated radio telescopes array, listening even more detailed and more closely to get a signal from outer space. And they just had the same conclusions, just more of it. So SETI, I think, is starting to die out. People are starting to realize, so people came around to think, whoa, Enrico Fermi was actually right and the whole world was wrong. And online, this is before the military has declassified their 3 videos. There's 3 videos that they declassified, I think, just almost last year. So before that happened, people were making YouTube videos talking about what could possibly be the answer of Fermi's paradox. And they're all very chilling things, because according to Fermi's paradox, for some reason we don't understand mathematically, it seems like we're alone in the universe, even though we shouldn't be. Even though the math says we obviously shouldn't be, but yet it appears that we are alone. That's what Fermi's paradox is really all about. And so people are coming up with very dire predictions. That one of them was the idea that Earth is just the right size, because a lot of the extrasolar planets they found close to our size were designated as super Earths, and so the gravity would be too great, so that even if an intelligent species came to be, they would never get off of the planet. And there are other very, very dark, dire ideas, and one, of course, being that before we came around, there were intelligent beings, but they had a vast nuclear war. All these things were, but all these things, all these answers to Fermi's paradox were not very believable if you looked at them closely. But most people lack the patience, skill, intelligence to look at anything closely. Mostly patience. No one, we're not an intelligent species, and even by our own admission. I mean, the word mediocre means both average and stupid. Even by our own admission, if we are honest with ourselves, we're not so bright. It takes a tremendous a lot of emotional intelligence to go against our nature and just jump to conclusions that we want to believe. Anyway, here's the deal about the whole Bob Lazar thing. Right now, some of what he says is hard for me to believe, but every day, the more I look at it, that number of things that are hard to believe goes down. The trend is that it's going down. It's not going up. Like, I'm not finding more and more stuff that makes it impossible to believe that. And last night I read his staunchest critic is this guy who's he has a master's degree in physics. But he said, but the guy with the master's degree in physics, if I study it long enough, the stuff that he says that doesn't add up starts to go up. Because he leaves out, he only cherry picks the things that about the story that he can criticize the best. Somehow Bob Lazar got a job at Los Alamos. And somehow he worked on a particle accelerator. Those two facts the guy left out. He would say, okay, so he got a job there, but he was probably just an electrician. I'm not going to get into that, but I want to just talk about Fermi's paradox. Now listen to this. The idea that essentially there's truth in the Bob Lazar story. Even if Bob Lazar is a complete hoaxer, even if the whole thing is crap. He knows enough truths that there is still some sort of project like that. Now, if he's so either he's a mastermind manipulator, or he's telling the truth. If he's a mastermind manipulator, then he's getting his ideas from other people that worked at S4. Do you see? S4 is real because I made software for S4 when I was working at this company in Sunnyvale called Handar, which is bought out by Vizsla. Vizsla does weather monitoring and measurement devices, custom devices to measure the environment. I wrote software for that to interface with the computer with that thing when I was at Handar, and it was sold to S4. See, that is the one thing, that fact, that personal experience is the one little annoying little bug in my head. The fact that S4 was real. And it wasn't Area 51. It was S4 because S4 was run by the Navy, and all the other stuff at Groom Lake, the spy planes and everything, was the Air Force. Okay? So I know S4, that's annoying to me that S4 existed. If you fly over there now, if someone has a YouTube thing where they take a tour, they fly over the area, and they say, look, there's where S4 was. And S4 actually was, they found it on military maps. They say Area 51 and S4, and it's the same bold font. So there was something there. But you fly over there now, there's not even a road going there. There's not even a access route to that area. It's just completely empty. And that is suspicious in and itself. Do you see what I'm saying? That just raises the bizarreness of this to another level. But here's the conclusion I'm trying to get to. This stuff, so maybe there's some sketchy stuff from the source material. Maybe some people are lying. Maybe some people are exaggerating. Maybe Bob Lazar is a master manipulator. He worked at S4, but maybe sweeping floors, or maybe he was doing some type of work, and he picked up enough information to put together a good story that he could. Who knows? It's all very. Belief is the end of intelligence. Once you commit to a belief, that's the end of learning. So the whole alien thing is the best and most logical answer to Fermi's paradox. And here is why. It is not the fact, a lot of people discount the little green men because they look so much like us. They're the same scale as us. They have the sensory, they have two eyes. They have the sensory organs are all in the head. They have a head and a neck. And they have two arms. They're bipedal. They have two arms, although they don't have thumbs. By the way, the movie Paul, they got that wrong. They should have had Paul with no thumbs. They don't have thumbs, but physically, it's just uncanny how close they look like us, okay? But that is still the best answer to Fermi's paradox, because you got to stop thinking of it from our point of view. It's not that they look like us, it's that we look so much like them. And that is why they're curious about us. The planet, the star system that all the evidence points to, Zeta Reticuli. Just the fact that all these unrelated bits of evidence all point to only one place and not multiple places. You would think that if it was a hoax and different people were making the hoax, different little scams, they would pick multiple different star systems that wouldn't line up. The fact that they all go to the same star system, it just blows my mind that there are three different unrelated things that point to the same star system. And I'll talk about the star system a little bit more in a second. But you got to stop thinking of it from our point of view. You got to think of it from their point of view. All right? They existed. Those stars are sun-like stars. The binary stars are sun-like stars. So the star of our sun's classification is unique because it lasts a really long time. It lasts for 4 billion years. All right? No, sorry. It lasts for 10 billion years. I'm sorry. That classification lasts for 10 billion years. The Zeta Reticuli star system are two suns, and they're I don't know how they figured this out, but I looked and I Googled and I found this. They last, they are 1 billion years older than ours. I don't know how they figured it out, but I read it on a science post, not on a UFO post. They're 1 billion years older than ours, okay? Now, if their planet, and I think it's the third or fourth, I think it's fourth, the fourth planet from, according to the briefs that Bob Lazar said, it's the fourth planet away from that sun, okay? So, the fact that, and all this stuff I'm telling you, I need to keep between you and me. This is going to all be in my book. Don't write a book. Don't steal my ideas and write a book. That's what someone else actually has done that to me. I did a whole lot of research on a topic, and I was naive to share it with someone, and they went and wrote a book in 2016. That's not going to happen again, because I'll have proof that you stole this from me. I'll send my lawyers after you. Anyway, so if that planet, if there happens to be a planet around Zeta Reticuli that's actually more conducive, more favorable for intelligent life to arise, then they've been there. They've existed for before there was dinosaurs on Earth. All right, and I'm sure they advanced to the point where they started searching all around the galaxy, and I'm sure they found life here and there. But lo and behold, there's these simian beings on our planet that kind of look like them. You got to see it from their point of view, that probably the reason why they're there is that they have interest in us. And they have interest in us in a kind of fraternal way, apart from the fact that, we have different musculatures and stuff like that, but they probably are interested in us, and that's why they're here. And they wouldn't want to interfere with us so much. So this is like taking Enrico Fermi's concept and going, okay, so we have most people, and then we have SETI and Carl Sagan, then we have Enrico Fermi, more intelligent. This is actually above that. This actually makes sense. It actually clicks together. Despite what we want to believe, the truth doesn't give a damn what we believe. The truth doesn't give a damn what we want to believe. And I think James Randi said this. The truth is always rejected. As Einstein said, great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. And I was telling my son that this is what a lightning rod, the expression a lightning rod, this is a lightning rod. And to know what that means, why some things are called lightning rods, is because the first lightning rod was a lightning rod. But it was the cliche lightning rod, but it's where the term, that's a lightning rod, comes from. It is something that completely disrupts humanity. It disrupts the way people have thought for thousands of years. When Benjamin Franklin invented the lightning rod, it caused an immense panic, hysteria in what was then civilized world. Whenever a lightning would strike something, it was always assumed that it was an act of God. especially the Puritans. The Puritans were really big on that. So when lightning would hit something, oh, that, God's punishing you for something, or it's, it was literally an act of God. God controlled the lightning. He controlled these nature things, these mysterious things that happen. The idea that human beings could build a device to deflect lightning away from other things, a lightning rod, that was unimaginable. That was unthinkable. The idea that human beings could influence something that everyone had utmost confidence was literally an act of God was iconoclastic. It was not to be believed. It was beyond fiction. If someone wrote a fantasy novel of something that could do that, no one would believe it. And lightning rods have happened all throughout history. The discovery of germ theory was a lightning rod. The discovery of New World was a lightning rod. And we don't know it in the United States, but my sister-in-law knows it from her experience, but walking on the moon was a lightning rod. Her dad was she was an Air Force brat, my sister-in-law. And she was in Saudi Arabia in this little encampment or something, and they would have a TV that they would pull out in the community and plug it in. They'd watch things on the television. And they're watching Neil Armstrong walk down those steps and walk on the moon. And she was because she was an American, she was all excited. But to Muslims, doing something like that is beyond impossible. It is beyond fantasy. It's beyond science fiction. It's beyond what anyone could ever imagine. It was absurd to a level that it transcends the human language to express. And here's why. According to the Quran, heaven is literally domes, the domes of heaven. There's 7 of them, and the stars are in the lowest heavens. It's described as being on the lowest heavens in the Quran. And people in Saudi Arabia would believe this literally in the 1960s. They wouldn't say, like today they say it's allegorical or whatever. They apologists try to explain it away, and they fail. But anyway, the moon is described as being in the midst of the 700. So literally, according to the Quran, the moon is really close to God. And I have a Muslim friend that only a few years ago when I was working at Microsoft, his name is Muhammad Khan. He even told me that according to him, and this is in the 2000 something, just a few years ago, he said he has trouble believing that people walked on the moon because the moon is so close to God. The moon is close to God. That was a lightning rod. And even to this day, it happened in the 1960s, and even present day, if I talk about this to Muhammad Khan, he'll probably still say it's hard for them to believe that a man walked on the moon, because to their culture and what they're raised since infancy to believe, that is counter to that. It's a lightning rod. So all this stuff I think you have a disadvantage than me, because I started emailing you these topics before expressing what really has kicked this off in society, and that is the fact that the Pentagon has declassified these 3 videos that have been leaked, and these 3 videos are from the cockpits of Navy pilots. I think one was done in 2004, and one was done in 2014. I don't know what the third one was done. The third one is just as fuzzy. So those 3 videos of extraterrestrial aircraft recorded by Navy pilots that have been declassified is the lightning rod. All right. All this other stuff that's just fallout from that, including people re-examining Bob Lazar's claims, and this new Netflix video that some guy made with Bob Lazar, and the fact that Joe Rogan now says that Bob Lazar has been completely vindicated. But imagine for a moment, what if Bob Lazar has been telling the truth all the time? And so for the last 30 years, his life has been a living nightmare. Can you imagine a scientist? And a scientist being grouped with all the schizophrenics that think that aliens are real? Now, I'm going to pause while I take a drink of water. I've been talking for 35 minutes. So, when I need to relate a story to you that might be how you might be thinking right now. All right. All right. So I was raised a Christian. My grandfather was a Greek Orthodox. My dad, we were Episcopalian and then later Methodist. My younger brother is a Lutheran. My older brother is a Catholic. Albeit, when I talk to my older brother about this stuff, he compartmentalizes all of his Catholic beliefs, and we talk about the fact that this is the most sensible and logical answer to Fermi's paradox, and it was been all around us since the 40s. It's kind of mind-blowing, But anyway, I want to relate this one story to you. So, when I found out that I was going to be a dad, we bought a house, and I took the matter of what religion to bring my son up in seriously, and to this day I don't understand why no one else does. Why no one else takes this to be, for lack of a better term, hardcore, very, very serious, dreadfully serious. So for the first time in my life of being, this passionate Christian that had absolutely no doubt that Jesus of Nazareth was a son of God, that the Bible was essentially true, albeit maybe mystical, or its meaning was its true meaning took a tremendous amount of study and attention and all that stuff. That it was truth beyond truth kind of thing. All my life thinking like that. So the first time I decided to wipe the slate clean, wipe the proverbial slate clean, and this takes a tremendous amount of emotional maturity to do, and I don't think anyone else, I think very few people do this, but for the first time, I was going to open myself up to other religions and study them. And this, I don't think anyone else who's been raised a Christian does this. Extremely few people do this, because it's very uncomfortable to do. To wipe the proverbial slate clean and look at something completely anew. And what I learned is that Jesus of Nazareth was just a guy. He was a very intelligent guy, but he described the earth as being flat in two separate sermons. That thing where he goes to the top of a mountain, or the devil takes him to the top. He told this story, and it eventually worked itself in the Bible when he was on that little vision quest for 30 days and 30 nights in the desert. That Satan took him to the top of the mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the earth. Why do people? how many years is that? For how long have people been preaching that story from the pulpit, and no one ever catches that? In order to see all the kingdoms of the earth from the top of a mountain, no matter how high the mountain is, even if it goes into outer space, the earth would have to be flat. That's number one. Number two, people would ask him later during his during his career, towards the end of his life, people would ask him, he would talk about how he's going to return to the earth one day, and people would say, well, what will it look like? And he said this a number of times, actually. It mentions in a couple of books of the Bible that he would appear in the sky such that everyone on earth could see him. That's only possible if the earth is flat too. And apologists have said, well, they've retorted and told me that, well, you're forgetting the fact that you're forgetting the fact of television. And while it's really fun to imagine that Jesus of Nazareth could predict the existence of television, most of the world still lives without electricity. And there's like 2/3 of humanity live without electricity even to this day, and that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. So, yeah, there's other things like why didn't Jesus tell people about malaria? And also Jesus himself didn't understand how faith healing worked. When faith healing occurred, he would tell people that he wouldn't take credit for it. He'd say, oh, your faith has made you whole. And since he didn't understand how faith healing worked, he grew to assume that faith was like greater than anything else. And he would give sermons that if someone has even the smallest amount of faith, they can move mountains. He described it as Christians could have superpowers if they had enough faith. So I know this might be things you already know, but yeah, the Noah's Ark story couldn't have happened either. If it had happened, then all the fraternal DNA doesn't change from father to son, right? So if Noah's Ark story was true, then all males would have the same fraternal DNA. But instead, the majority of the largest set of fraternal DNA can be found in China, Mongolia, and it can all be traced back to Genghis Khan, not to Noah. What else? Oh yeah, it couldn't have happened because there's no evidence anywhere that the whole world was flooded, and if it had been flooded, there'd be evidence everywhere. Also, when we lived in Bellevue, we had a water softener. It had these rock salts in them, and one day I dumped it out into the lawn. That grass never came back. Salt water would wipe out all freshwater plants on Earth. We wouldn't have trees or grass or anything. It's just the whole Noah's Ark thing is a fantasy. And they found examples of it in similar stories in Gilgamesh, the Tales of Gilgamesh, which predate the Bible. It's almost an exact same story, but instead of God, there's gods, and even the dove story thing coming back. The Bible is written as to answer spiritual questions, not as a book of science. And I could go on and on and on and on about other things I found out, like the fact that the Bible actually, all religious dogma reflects the morality of that time. That it couldn't have come, no scriptures could have ever come from a deity. They had to have come from us, because the morality, the simple fact that the Old Testament morality isn't at all like the New Testament morality. In the Old Testament, slavery is condoned. The New Testament is not talked about too much. So, but anyway, so that ability, that thing that I did to put aside everything that I had learned up to that point and to wipe the slate clean and look at things objectively, opened up a whole new world for me, a new world of ideas that otherwise I wouldn't have had. And that's what is required of anyone to understand Fermi's paradox, to understand how the Lazar story is the only logical answer to that. And we live in a world of truths. We don't live in a world, society lives in a world of laws, but some laws aren't true. So I'm talking about human laws, not physics laws. I learned that the hard way. If you ever get involved in a legal battle, the whole system's designed to just make lawyers money. Now, I'm going to end with a quote. Let me find it first. All right, this is a quote by a man named Robert Anton Wilson, and I love it. This is a quote I found just recently, and it's already one of my favorites. My favorite is by Carl Jung. And Carl Jung said, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge." Thinking about UFOs logically is really difficult. It's really difficult because there's so much crap out there. But that's why we judge. We would rather just dismiss it, write it off. I think 99.99% of people would just write it off, one way or the other. Either they're in that culture, that pulp culture, and they accept it without blindly, or they're not, and they'll dismiss it blindly. Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. That's what Carl Jung said. But this is a quote by Robert Anton Wilson, and I don't know which quote I like better, but I like both of them a lot. So I'll read this quote. He says this: "I do not believe anything," and that is in capital letters. I do not believe anything. Most people, even the educated, think that everybody must believe something or other, that if one is not a theist, one must be a dogmatic atheist. And if one does not think capitalism is perfect, one must believe fervently in socialism. And if one does not have blind faith in X, one must alternatively have blind faith in not X, or the reverse of X. My own opinion is that belief is the death of intelligence.